What happens in a leadoff Zapdos mirror is set dependent. If it's an offensive Zapdos with Thunder Wave, chances are it's going to go for it. T-Wave Zapdos is great at nailing other Zapdos. It's one of its primary targets. This is crucial for offensive teams that usually struggle with it. It's so much easier to defeat if your Tyranitar, Metagross, Swampert, Suicune, Snorlax, Salamence, and Heracross are faster than it. While the Thunder Waving Zapdos is going to swallow a hit in return, whatever that hit is, Thunderbolt, Toxic, or even Thunder Wave, it will be well worth it to make sure the opposing Zapdos does not terrorize its team, which it probably will. If you run offense, you're almost Zapdos weak by default. If it's offensive Zapdos without Thunder Wave, however, it's probably going to switch out. It's not worth staying in and taking whatever the other Zapdos wants to dish out if all you're going to do is damage. While it might sound nice to dish out 60% on an opposing offensive Zapdos, the benefits of that are not nearly as tangible as the guaranteed payoff of Thunder Wave's speed drop. Even if you hit it for 60%, Zapdos is fast, Zapdos is bulky, Zapdos resists common offensive attacks. It is going to find its way back in, and it's going to launch a big Thunderbolt you do not want to be taking. By taking away its speed, you take that possibility away. You run it over. If it's simply a specially defensive Zapdos, it stays in. It's not afraid of offensive Zapdos without Sand, and it gains information either way. If it's offensive, then you know the other guy's probably running an offensive team. If it's specially defensive, then you know it's probably a more defensive team, and it's not as dangerous to rest since you're not letting in as many dangerous Pokemon, and you can burn those sleep turns easily against Pokemon that aren't dishing out a ton of damage, like Milotic or non-Calm Mind Celebi. Both players switch, indicating non-specially defensive Zapdos, and they go to good early game Snorlax checks. Emphasis on early game because the longer the game goes, the quicker they get worn down, while a smart Zapdos that comes in on something it scares like Suicune or Swampert is going to just keep hitting them. Now, Snorlax on Phil's team, paired with an offensive Zapdos, offensive since it switched out of fear of opposing Zapdos, means that he is running physical or mixed offense. Lex is a fine Zapdos check early in the game without Sandstorm or Spikes, especially Sand. Celebi likely indicates special or mixed offense at first glance. Lax can stay in to throw out a body slam and look for a paralysis on whatever switches in. Since offensive Celebi doesn't want to go one-on-one with Lax outside of Sand, Sand ensures that Psychic leaves a lasting impact rather than just getting passively healed off. Thus, it's likely to switch to Tyranitar or Metagross that is common on that kind of team. However, Fakes throws everyone for a loop and goes for Leech Seed. Now, this immediately insinuates that his team has a lot more bulk and longevity to it than expected when Zapdos revealed itself to be offensive. It's very uncommon to see offensive Zapdos alongside Leech Seed Celebi. Now, Phil reveals Charizard, fully confirming offense, and Fake's Baton passes out. This lets him bring Zapdos back in safely. Now, at this point, one of Magneton or Dugtrio is looking likely, as this Zapdos is pretty much confirmed offensive, and probably has Baton Pass as well. And the two easily Baton Pass back and forth and can set up traps since they attract trappable Pokemon. Zapdos and Magneton may seem weird together, but Zapdos baits in Blissey, Celebi baits in Scarm, Magneton in, dead Scarm. Plus, they resist each other's weaknesses quite nicely between Rock and Ground and Ice. And Zapdos checks Suicune, whereas Magneton does not. Though Celebi kind of does that depending on sets. Anyway, Dugtrio is traditionally more likely, though, alongside the two. But there also could be both Magneton and Dugtrio. Anyway, we now confirm that Fakes' Zapdos is an offensive set as it lets loose a Thunderbolt and stings Snorlax hard, stripping off nearly 30%. The nice thing about Baton Pass Zapdos is its counters tend to be slower, meaning Baton Pass can be used safely, and this is crucial because it catches any potential double switches. Like if you T-Bolt on a Blissey switch and you Baton Pass, you make sure that they don't go to Magneton on your Skarmory, for example. It's also crucial in the case of Tyranitar and Snorlax because it catches Focus Punch on the charge turn, so you avoid disaster scenarios like having your own Tar disintegrated by Snorlax's Focus Punch. Or you can even do things like switch Ments into Tyranitar's Focus Punch to intimidate, resist the attack, and scare it out rather than letting your Swampert take the full brunt of the attack. So we do see the Baton Pass from Zapdos, and we see Skarmory come in. So offensive Zapdos on a spiking team with Celebi, that's not the most common team strategy. So Snorlax goes for Shadow Ball, looking to hit Celebi harder, possibly catching careless Gengar, although at this point of the game it would be foolish. So Fakes prioritizes Spikes over Sand, I guess, for offensive pressure. I mean, I don't know, because he's almost definitely got a Tyranitar here. Matter of fact, it's pretty much guaranteed to everyone watching that he's got a Tar in the wings, and Tar's Spikes, or Tar's Sand would neuter Snorlax's lefties immediately and bring it down into Zapdos range. And since Phil's running offense, this is the Zapdos check, so this gets worn down, Phil's in trouble. But he decides he'd rather have the Spikes early on. So Phil reveals himself to be a Focus Punch Snorlax. Fakes goes for the layer of Spikes. Snorlax is getting HP, but he's got the Spike down on the field, so when Tyranitar comes in later, then damage is going to start racking up really quickly. Now, Skarmory runs Drill Peck a lot more than it did some time ago, when you could pretty much religiously count on it being Spikes, Whirlwind, Protect, Toxic. It runs Drill Peck because Gengar switching in for free all day is annoying. Focus Punch Heracross is obnoxious. And so is Focus Punch Snorlax. And that's where I was leading to, that it can disrupt Snorlax and actually damage it. It also is good for Refresh Claydol and finishing off weakened Forretress. So it's got a whole host of applications, and if he's got Drill Peck, he's likely to use it now. So Charizard comes in, he's not going to risk that, and Fakes just goes for another layer of Spikes. He's going all in on the passive damage, which will rack up later in the game, and he can ride to victory. I mean, that extra layer of Spikes alongside Sand, that could very well be the difference in Snorlax being able to take a Thunderbolt or two from Zapdos. Now, Charizard is really scary. Stab, Fire, and HP Grass, and this Zapdos is offensive, and even a defensive Zapdos would not want to switch into a Zard Fire Blast. It'd prefer to come in on HP Grass, even without Sand. I mean, it can do it once, but it's still a big hit, and this is an offensive Zapdos. So, Tyranitar is common here, or almost guaranteed here, and with these Pokemon, you are going to need a solid rock check. So Swampert is extremely likely. I mean, if he's running something fancy like Metagross and Magneton, then that's just super Zard food. But basically, rock checks like Swampert, Jirachi, Metagross, then you can start getting into the fringe ones like Steelix or whatever. Basically, the true rock checks, not the ones in conjunction with others. I guess you could count Claydol, but they really don't like Charizard. So Tyranitar does not want to eat a Focus Punch at all. And Zard is most commonly sub Fire Blast, HP Grass, Focus Punch. It's kind of like a slightly weaker Moltres that can also Focus Punch Tar and Snorlax and Blissey, meaning it's more self-sustaining and can fit on mixed offenses. So Tar doesn't want to, get Focus Punched into oblivion. Swampert is not an option with HP Grass, and we don't know what the last is. So we see Charizard go for a Fire Blast, and Skarmory goes down. So the rationale behind that, of course, is, well, I can't really switch into the Charizard. Snorlax probably isn't an issue if I'm just careful around the Focus Punch, especially because he's going to follow this up with Tyranitar. So Sand's up, he's scaring out the Zard guaranteed, he's got his passive damage, he's got his 2 layers of Spikes, so it's worth making sure that he doesn't do anything too dangerous to my other Pokemon. Skarmory was less of a valuable commodity than the others. So Tyranitar comes in to follow up, Charizard's going to run away, Metagross or Swampert are the most common responses to Tyranitar. Since they resist rock, they can take general hits, and they hit hard in return. They also like that Skarmory is down. Well, Metagross does, because Swampert does not enjoy Celebi. However, Celebi, if it gets hit with an Ice Beam on the switch, then it has to recover, and that lets Charizard in for free again, and then Fakes is in another rough spot. Of course, with HP Grass, he could really catch Swampert off guard, but we don't know the Tyranitar set yet. Phil throws everyone for a loop and goes for Breloom, so we've got 2 BL Pokemon on his team. Now, Breloom is an underappreciated Gen 3 Pokemon. I mean, it's got a lot of issues. It's frail, it can't have all the moves it wants, but it's got some great qualities, especially for offense. A sleep move on offense is invaluable. That's almost 6'5" right off the bat, and then it either hits something else really hard, or if you just let the sleeping Pokemon go, it can sleep something else. And Breloom has the speed to threaten a lot of the slower defensive metagames. So, like, coming on T-Tar, Blissey, Swampert, you're going to Spore something and then throw around some really dangerous hits. I mean, Focus Punch, it can HP Ghost the obvious Gengar switch-ins. It's got Sky Uppercut for reliable fighting stab. It's got Mach Punch for DD Tars and finishing off weakened things. Priority is rare in advance, so it's really valuable, but it doesn't even need any of those things. So you can run Swords Dance and just make sure you really can't wall it, because Swampert is kind of a check to Breloom one-on-one. So, as funny as that may seem for players of the later gens. Anyway, so Fakes has Celebi. He's got the counter, but the conundrum is still something else has to sleep, and then he's got to switch into the Focus Punch, and like with the hypothetical Swampert Ice Beam, when Celebi comes in, it's probably going to have to recover, because, I mean, even a resisted Focus Punch hurts a lot. Breloom is really strong, and then Charizard comes back in. So, he goes to Swampert to absorb the Spore. I guess he figured, well, Phil's team is more focused on the mixed offense, meaning lots of HP Grasses, meaning less DDing, and without the Dragon Dancers around, then Swampert is less valuable, and it's just a victim for HP Grass, so it's probably going to be less valuable, so I'll let this go to sleep, and I'm going to need the others. So, now we've got the Focus Punch, and Fakes is going to stay in, curiously, and Swampert eats a ton of damage. So that's offensive Swampert as well, which is quizzical, because at this point you've got offense. I mean, this is kind of defense, but this is your rock check, so you're probably going to want some defense on it, but maybe his last Pokemon helps in that regard. So who knows? It could be a Metagross, although, you know, Gengar or Magneton are likelier because they help Skarmory actually keep its spikes. Though with Drill Peck, I guess the necessity for that is technically not as high, as long as he's prepared to play a longer game. We also don't know what his tar set is, and that could assist in the spiking department as well. So, Fakes goes to Celebi and gets crit by Focus Punch, so that really, really stings. If the Breloom has Mach Punch, it's going to be in range now, but even if not, then, you know, Charizard is coming in for free as Celebi recovers. And yeah, so that Focus Punch crit hurt a lot. We'll see how it would have played out. So Fakes makes an aggressive move and goes to Zapdos as Charizard comes back in. So Zard does not have a free turn to start threatening death. Now, from Sandstorm, Charizard got hit by sand and got its leftovers first. That doesn't necessarily tell us anything, but I think in the current metagame, it's just super likely that you see plus speed Charizard. Get the most out of it with that 328 speed stat for Zapdos and Jirachi and Salamence and Flygon. Even if it's not hitting them hard, just being faster can be a game changer. Kind of like the Zapdos example at the beginning of the battle, then just being faster than even something like Tyranitar that Zapdos loses to one-on-one. If you T-bolts it and it then kills you with Rock Slide, well, now it's in range for Earthquake. So same principle with Charizard and like finishing off a weakened Flygon or just putting it in range for Aerodactyl Double Edge or something. So, but it's probably not going to stay in here because he's going to have opportunity later. But at the same time, his checks are not looking great. Breloom took a big Rock Slide coming in, And Zapdos is in a switch, and 2 spikes and sand for Snorlax. It's looking not so good. He's going to sacrifice Breloom. He said, you know what? Breloom did enough damage. And I think that was the right call. He did more than enough. So now he's going to one-on-one it with Zapdos. And Swampert comes in. So, and he goes for Thunder Wave. So he decided to not go for the turn 1 Thunder Wave because Snorlax is early on a good check, but he does have it for that emergency. Thunder Wave is also good for DDers, of course. What's crucial about Celebi being weakened there and not recovering on the switch to Charizard is that now Fakes is very open to HP Grass Zapdos, since Celebi and Swampert pair to counter both HP Ice and HP Grass versions of them. And between Natural Cure and Refresh Swampert, then they also handle status. But with Swampert doesn't really matter against HP Grass, but with Celebi that low, then it's a big threat. So he'd have to, like, pivot T-Tar in on the slightly weaker HP Grass, since HP Grass is weaker than Thunderbolt, even though it's super effective from that. Now, he just decides to let Swampert go rather than risking Tyranitar's health, because that's going to be crucial. And Swampert was asleep. Though I'm not sure, since if Snorlax booms, it's going to pretty much put it into range of anything anyway. And that's not going to make much of a difference. And Charizard, you know, Focus Punch. I guess it could make a difference with HP Grass later. But, that's a tough call at this point. So Zapdos BP's out, and now we see Metagross coming in after Breloom's done damage. So that was really nice how he went to Breloom first to, you know, cause the ruckus. And now he's still got a healthy Metagross to handle the Tar, which misses Rock Slide, but it's got lefties. So Phil makes a prediction, and Psychics the Tyranitar hitting the Zapdos switch for a lot of damage. So definitely offensive Zapdos and offensive Metagross. Psychic Mash, HP Fire, Explosion, blows up everything, keeps Skarmory out of its face, hits Gengar. Even if burned. So now we've got that Zapdos conundrum again. Except this time, well, Zapdos is going to 2 KO Metagross, and Psychic is not going to KO. So, and, you know, switching into Snorlax, then you have predictions, Focus Punching the Tar switch, and this could still be a Gengar, and it could just get messy. So it seems more prudent to just blow it up and guarantee the Zapdos is gone, since, I mean, Charizard's a threat, and, I mean, Zapdos is looking pretty threatening too, but it also depends on his last. So, but, even though he looks down, this Zapdos is just so scary to this team. Zapdos versus offense, especially with spikes. I mean, sand is a given, but spikes really making it rough. So, I guess maybe it would have been wiser to explode on the switch, since there was no way anything else was coming in. It was just too risky. And at this point, like, he can Baton Pass, you know, into Gengar, or even, yeah, or Magneton, since those are the most likely lasts. And yeah, I don't know, I think Explosion might have removed some element of risk, but we're going to see the Thunderbolt go off and then the boom. So it's now 5-3. Snorlax comes in. It can narrow it to 4-2 with boom, but he does not come in on Celebi. He comes in on Tyranitar. And I'm not sure about that one, because, I mean, the last has to beat Tyranitar, right? Because otherwise he's just going to lose anyway. And, I think that was wiser, because even if Celebi comes in, then that's Zard, and that's more killing without boom. And, I mean, Celebi even recovers on Snorlax. So, I don't know, I think Snorlax was key in guaranteeing some sort of leverage, or guaranteeing some sort of, like, way to close the game, or close the gap towards the end of the game. So I think it may have been better to be more careful with it. As now he's forced into a boom, and now Fakes reveals Gengar and soaks it up. So now it is 3-3. Oh, did I say 5-3 earlier? I meant 4-3, and I closing the gap to 3-2. Anyway, so Zapdos is in. Zapdos is still a threat, with T-Wave ruining Gengar. And, of course, it's tough to switch into it. T-Tar can take 2 and possibly claim another kill, but this last Pokemon has to be some semblance of a Tyranitar switch in. With the Rock Slide, it's likely, I mean, it could be DD, but it's likelier to just be 4 attacks. Quake, Slide, HP Bug, and Focus Punch, which is used to help these teams thwart things like Snorlax and Suicune, just generally being tough to safely switch into, especially with spikes down. It's a no-nonsense set, and by focusing on HP and attack, then you maximize what it's best at without worrying about things like Thunder Wave, especially since Tyranitar often comes into Snorlax, and Snorlax often uses Body Slam, which paralyzes, so you're still effective if that happens. You're like against a Porygon 2 or a Blissey or Regice that's also spamming T-Wave. Basically guaranteeing it's going to be useful, and you don't have to tiptoe around using your Tyranitar, which is obviously an incredibly important weapon. So Fakes is going to sacrifice the Celebi as Phil goes to Zapdos, or goes for Thunder Wave. I'm wondering, does he want to save that sack for later? I guess he doesn't know what it is, but I guess at this point he's really counting on Phil not being able to answer the Tyranitar. I mean, it's tough to get a handle on a team with Charizard and Breloom. I mean, he's got the necessary checks to stuff since Metagross and Snorlax practically check the whole metagame by themselves. I mean, one tanks special hits, one tanks physical hits. They both blow up. He's got T-Wave Zapdos to check anything that tries to set up, and Breloom is a backup rock check, which can sow doubt. So you really don't know if this is going to be a Tyranitar or a Swampert or even a Salamence. So I guess he's really just thinking, Gengar's crucial, T-Tar's health can be crucial. I gotta preserve that, and Celebi is pretty much guaranteed to not do anything. So I'm just going to let it go. So Celebi goes down, and Tyranitar comes in and is going to let loose a Rock Slide. So BP, and we see a Swampert last. So that's interesting because, first of all, it takes a ton from Rock Slide. So that's banded Tyranitar, not 4 attacks. It's still physical attacking, but that's banned. And I guess I should have noticed that from how much it did to Breloom earlier. I guess I just kind of assumed, oh, well, Breloom is frail, uninvested. But it did do a ton of damage. It did 40%. Yeah, that I should have noticed that then. My bad. And so I'll try to retroactively make up for it. Band is likelier to run less bulk, meaning it's also less likely, excuse me, to be able to eat 2 Thunder Waves, or Thunderbolts, sorry. So he really had to preserve that health, and he Rock Slides on Pert, does a ton, offensive Pert. So that's interesting because Phil's running an offensive team without Sand. Now, most players really can't go without Tar in these teams, not just because of its defensive utility in handling Snorlax and pseudo-checking Zapdos, and generally being able to take a hit from dangerous things, even if they're super effective, like Salamence and Swampert. But also because Sand cripples things like Milotic. So I guess the rationale for not having it is, well, if they don't have Sand, then my Snorlax is a lot more threatening, because Snorlax outside of Sand is terrifying. And if they do have Sand, then Charizard and Breloom are really scary. So kind of a win-win. Plus, Tyranitar is so common that, I mean, I don't recommend this necessarily because Tyranitar is amazing by itself. But sometimes if you're really wanting to get that coverage, then you can kind of count on the other guy to bring Tyranitar and set up the Sandstorm for you, so you can reap the benefits of certain Pokemon being hit by it without having Tyranitar take up a slot on your team. But like I said, then if there's no Sand, then Snorlax is really scary, and there's less pressure, and there's less of a timer choking this out, which is always the biggest fear with offensive teams, not being able to break the opposing team and getting suffocated. I mean, getting swept is up there, but with it's not as bad because, double bulky blob guys, not to mention, more bulk on Swampert, and these guys have Boom, and this guy has T-Wave, and it's hard to set up too safely, so. I mean, DD Mence would like to face this team, but at the same time, DD Mence also doesn't really have a safe setup outside of on Charizard. So, yeah. And it can still be checked once or twice. Maybe even a couple more times, I guess, depending. Anyway, that's, before we go down that railroad, then Fakes really, I mean, if he's got Hypnosis Gengar, he can kind of pull it off. Well, it's tough because, Giga Drain Swampert, I guess you choose one of these guys to Hypnosis, and then you 2-hit KO them. You 2-hit KO the other, so something gets sacked. So you would have to like switch to one of these guys on the grass move, and then make it use Hypnosis, and then sacrifice this, so you can. Well, I guess you would sacrifice Zap to Hypnosis, because Charizard threatens to kill Gengar with Blaze boosted Fire Blast, whereas Zapdos comes up short. And the reason I say that is because maybe Fakes wants to preserve Gengar's health and just if it's a Hypnosis set, he can just let T-Tar go and preserve Gengar's health so we can take that Zapdos Thunderbolt. But Hypnosis is rare these days because its accuracy is horrendous. So it's likelier that he swallows a hit with Gengar here, preserves T-Tar for Zapdos, and goes in the offensive with Gengar. He does go to Gengar. Eats a Hydro Pump. That was pretty obligatory since the Pert is not very bulky and it's on a mixed offense team. They gotta scare Scarm at every opportunity. So he's got to run. The question is what he's going to run to. Charizard's not looking super viable here, and the two moves are either Giga Drain or HP Grass and Ice Punch for 2-hit KOing Zapdos on the switch. A Thunderbolt would be incredibly hard to pull off here, because then Zapdos is still out of range. So, and I mean, I guess it's feasible just because that's the safest route for Phil. Especially since now Zapdos can kill Gengar. Gengar is no longer at 100%. So I guess Thunderbolt wouldn't be the most outrageous move since he saw Phil taking the safest route, and he would maximize his odds that way. And it's very unlikely that Thunderbolt plus Ice Punch would kill Charizard. So he could do that without letting Phil pivot into Zapdos. Interesting to see if this comes down to Swampert's speed, which is probably max at this point, honestly. Offensive Swamperts just get faster and faster and faster. Though on a team like this, I would say you want those 112 defense EVs, or whatever benchmark you like to have some semblance of security against physical attackers, especially with no Intimidate here. But it wouldn't be surprising if this was just max special attack, max speed, like Rash Nature. And CB Tar can run bulk, but it can also run max speed, so wonder if it comes down to that. Anyway, so he goes to Tyranitar. That was a great move, because now... Well, this is interesting, because Phil can sub here, and if he wants to bank on Swampert being faster, he can switch in and launch off a Hydro Pump and pretty much win. Although I guess it would probably also not be the worst idea to just let it go, because then Swampert can take a hit in case it's slower. And in the alternative, where Tyranitar is faster than Swampert, then you just lose. So you're definitely letting Charizard go here. You sub, because you may as well go for that miss, and you're going to have to make him hit a couple. And HP Grass also means that in a worst case, then he can't take 2 Thunderbolts from Zapdos. So, oh, he just goes for HP Grass. He doesn't even sub. Maybe it wasn't sub Charizard. Maybe it was 4 attacks, the 4th being Dragon Claw for coverage on Mence and Flygon. But yeah, he's going to sting it. And that HP Grass does a ton, so I'm guessing that is a fast Tyranitar. But Swampert is faster. Now, Phil goes for Ice Beam, and that was the correct move, because with the lack of bulk and with the max special attack investment on Swampert, then that was going to put Zapdos in, put Tyranitar in Zapdos range, and it's going to come down to Gengar versus Zapdos anyway. And you don't risk Hydro Pump missing, and of course you kill a Gengar switch, fishing for a miss. So that was the correct move. So Gengar fires off HP Grass on an offensive team like this, then you're going to want HP Grass to kill Pursuit Tar with spikes up. The extra damage can be huge. So now the final standoff of the game, Gengar versus Zapdos. Now, it depends on set. Offensive Zapdos, even with no bulk, will never die to an explosion from Gengar, because common explosion Gengar is minus attack, because you want bulk on Gengar, or you don't want to dip into it. I mean, feasibly you could, but let's take a look at this. Feasibly you could, but usually you don't, especially if you don't want to go minus defense, because then you start dropping to Arrow, Rock Slides, and you don't want to go minus special defense because, Pursuit Tar. So, yeah, and even the 0 attack Gengar Explosion versus Bulkless is a let's call it 38% chance to tie. So, and it's probably not going to be that set. If you have Hypnosis, you go for it 100%, but the odds are that Explosion would result in a loss. Now, Destiny Bond is a tie, and what makes this interesting is that Phil can potentially go for Thunder Wave to bypass the Destiny Bond, and you just use it twice to be sure because you can live a hit. And then, of course, you start getting into mind game territory. Like, is he gonna taunt me on the D-Bond? Taunt D-Bond me, because Gengar would run Taunt D-Bond. Or Taunt and D-Bond on the same set. Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, D-Bond, one attack is a common move these days. A common moveset these days. But then you realize, HP Grass, it's not going to be Taunt, Destiny Bond, and HP Grass as the sole move. The sole move is like Ice Punch or Thunderbolt. So, Thunder Wave does seem pretty safe. And even Taunt HP Grass, because HP Grass and Taunt generally don't go together, because Taunt Will-O-Wisp sometimes runs Fire Punch and Giga Drain on bulky sets. And you run Giga Drain because it can bring you out of range from Claydol's Psychic, since that set runs a ton of special defense. And it can also force Tyranitar to have to crunch to kill you if it pursuits the first time. And that gives you another shot at escaping that one-on-one. So basically, HP Grass is not going to have Taunt on it, and that makes Thunder Wave the superior move overall, because Destiny Bond, while rare, is a lot more feasible than Taunt in this scenario. So, and it's pretty riskless. I mean, Hypnosis, whatever. You just have to bank on that not working, of course. And if Fakes is just an offensive set, then he's got to go for the Ice Punch, Crit, or Freeze. Because HP Grass, offensive set, it's going to 2-hit KO an offensive Zapdos, meaning it's going to OHKO with a Crit, or he can get the Freeze and have Zapdos, stay frozen. So those are the odds, and Phil should just go for the Thunder Wave. He goes for the Ice Punch. It is a 2-hit KO, crit with no crit, no freeze, and Phil just straight up T-bolts. Now, of course, I could be missing something. I'm not discounting that possibility at all, but I just think with what I outlined, the Thunder Wave was the superior move. And I mean, worst case, you tie, I guess, but this was a tiebreaker, so it would have been a tie. They would have had to play again. Who knows how that would have worked out, but for the sake of just the battle itself, I mean, that's not a bad worst case, but I just don't think there was any downside to T-waving. So, I mean, because even if you taunts, then you get in the same scenario, and that would be an incredibly ballsy move. Anyway, to taunt Zapdos in that scenario. Anyway, so now that we have the gift of hindsight, then, and have commentated on the battle as it appeared, then I can divulge some more information. So, this team Fakes used was based on a team I built a while ago. Promise I'm not bragging. I hate talking about myself in my videos. But the idea is, it was tweaked by Ostamatitos, I believe. And this is a uncommon Celebi set. Leech Seed, Baton Pass, Calm Mind. I mean, Leech Seed, Baton Pass is nothing new. But Calm Mind on that set, you ditch Recover, or you ditch an attacking move. And the idea is that you give your Zapdos and your Gengar a lot more bite, and it make it a lot more of an offensive team than just passively trying to wall things and becoming susceptible to mixed offense. And the idea is sound, because by going more offensive with Zapdos, then you become less prone to things like offensive Suicune and Heracross. And the Zapdos is also agility, because that makes it even more of a fearsome sweeper. No Aerodactyl ruining your revenge kill. And the two are really, really nice together. And of course, you can go defensive. You have the backbone. You have a great backbone with Leech Seed and Recover. So, when Fakes got crit, he was planning to Calm Mind and Baton Pass. And that would have put him in a good position. However, with the T-Wave Zapdos, I'm not sure how it would have gone. It would have been different, for sure. So, this battle was great example of Zapdos being amazing, Thunderwave Zapdos being amazing, and underrated picks, Breloom, Charizard pulling their weight, as well as being exemplary of the common modern style of mixed offense, and fakes using something I used, I guess. The Tar is not originally choice band, it's 4 attacks physical, but, and Swampert has defense, I think it needed it for the longevity, but if you're passing Calm Mind and Agility, then I guess you would prefer, I don't know, I thought they were, Zapdos and Celebi and Gengar were self-sustaining enough to not need more offense against Pert, especially with spikes. So I figured Pert needed the longevity for both opposing sweepers and status, because I had refresh on it. Anyway, I don't want this to be about me, so yeah, I think I've exhausted all I can say about this battle and these battlers and the teams. So very good game, super intense stuff, high stakes, all that. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will catch you next time. If you have any questions, then please leave them for me. Or if, you know, I'm missing something anywhere, then, you know, let me know. So, yeah, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed. Catch you next time.